only small comment was, Steph, just a slight formatting thing on page 1. The page number goes over a little bit of text. I mean, it's very minor, but I'm not sure if you can just, I mean, it's still legible, but it's just maybe just move that line down to the next page or something. It's just like, it just kind of overruns, but that's tiny. Otherwise, any other concerns? Nope, hearing none. Somebody move to pass the minutes. Ron, thank you. Second, Maureen, thank you. All in favor?
Yep.
Yeah, we're all good. Okay, moving along. So number 3 is public comments. Steph, I don't think we have any. I'm not seeing any participants. No, we were given any notice of any public comments?
No.
Nope. Okay, moving along. Number 4, housing needs report. So Daniel Martin has a presentation for us. Take it away, Daniel.
So I circulated this just earlier, and this is just looking at the housing action plan adopted by council last spring. And it's just highlighting, okay, these are in the back of the housing action plan, or the background of the housing needs report, or back of the housing needs report is a housing action plan. And so it had 4 objectives that they identified as like, these are what they recommend we start with. And then each of those objectives had 1 or 2 strategies within it. And then they gave those different priorities. So high, medium, or low. And I thought when thinking of the work plan for this coming year, it's worth having another discussion with the committee in terms of what the committee thinks are like, those are ones that maybe the committee will look at addressing, or different ones they think, okay, these are ones we want to recommend to council to make a priority. So I'll go through the 4 objectives. So the first one being address market rate housing needs. And the first strategy was to enhance density on properties that are already serviced with municipal water and sewer. And the strategy 2 being enhance the supply of entry-level housing for young families and senior appropriate housing. The next objective identified was to enhance housing affordability. So promote the sustainable development of more affordable housing units and facilitate more discussion between private nonprofit developers and landowners concerning new affordable housing developments. The third objective targeted anticipated growth in population of seniors, so ensure adequate accessibility in housing for seniors. And the fourth objective was to address non-market housing needs. So the first one being working with other levels of government, community agencies, addressing housing affordability. And the second one, more generic, undertake research and education to support innovation. And then just for purposes of discussion, then I sort of plotted them or put them all out here with the objectives down the side and the strategies across for each one. And what I just did is I colored the ones they identified as high priority, I colored in that yellow because the red looked a little overpowering. The ones that they had as medium priorities, I put in blue, and then this one in gray or green, I guess, undertake research and education, they put as a low priority. So that was the overview that I just strung together to say, yeah, to guide discussion today.
So what do you need from us, Daniel? Just comments and thoughts, or reinforcing this is the right thing, or if we're missing something, what are you looking for from us?
I think I'm looking for, and this is tying into the work plan, like when I look at the work plan, I can see some things that, okay, they're actually tied directly to, you know, to these strategies. And so maybe it's tying them into the work plan and saying, okay, you know, the housing advisory committee identified these things we wanted to do this year. And they actually tie into strategies identified in the housing action plan, or there's ones we see that aren't being addressed that we think should be addressed, or you know, the ones that maybe aren't as high priority and they can be for future years.
Hey Daniel, does some of it needs examples?
Yeah, like in the report itself, there's a little more detail for each one. I think each of the strategies, it's kind of like steps or gives approaches.
Yeah, because it's still really general, right? So then.
Yeah, so I don't know then, or, you know, the committee wants to talk through, like focus a meeting on one of these topics, or, you know, how to actually delve into it more.
I look, going back to when we received the housing needs report just before COVID hit, think that's when it was. Super important thing to have done lots of data. And then when we got to the action plan section, my heart fell. And when I look at this again, my heart falls, you know, just I think even more so because of how generic the points are, and because of how in some of these areas, how restricted we are in terms of being able to make any sort of impact. So when I was trying to figure out, you know, how this relates to our work plan, I just had a sense of a very, very long trajectory to get any kind of positive outcome, if that were the approach that we took. And I always, when I have, you know, strong criticism, I always like to have something constructive to put forward as an alternative, but I didn't come up with anything particularly positive as an alternative.
Well, Maureen, I think for a lot of these, we can actually, let's say for our next meeting or so, prepare, let's call them examples, but there would be things that are more pragmatic and even could go to council. Like, let me give one example. Let's first read the first one. You know, so enhanced density on properties that are already serviced with municipal water and sewer lines, particularly in existing urban properties. I mean, this is kind of a really simple one, right? And you can say, well, what we would do is determine which areas those are and what can council do to enhance the density. Well, this is kind of really easy. For example, that's a prime area where maybe the whole neighborhood that is serviced by water and sewer is zoned duplex, you know, and then there's maybe a discussion, but it is really an example because it does all kinds of things that people want. It's an incremental densification that gives more access to, it makes houses more affordable. I'm not saying it makes them cheap, but it makes them more affordable because there's now, if you can strata title, there's two parties that bring their bag of money to the project, you know, with their borrowing capacity and all that. So, but it's incremental, and it can be encouraged by using the two-tiered zoning system. That you can have a single-family house of X square feet, and you can have a duplex, and you get a bonus, and you can start a title. Now, few people may do that, but in the end, like the city of Vancouver is doing it, and it's within the same massing, within the same square footage. What comes out of that too is that I would suggest that Bowen Island finally realizes that maximum floor space ratios are really important as a tool to council. Because if you set a maximum for a single family home, then you can encourage with providing more square footage in two-tier zoning. So, I mean, it's all there. That's already still the first one. And I think it's really easy actually to find all kinds of things that council can do. And a lot of it relates to your power, you know what I mean, of making controlling zoning and encouraging.
Could we move forward with that type of approach and not spend too much time as a committee going into the minutiae of the pros and cons, just enough so that there's a list of things that the council could potentially do, and get that before them.
Yeah, just a simple list of these are things that could be considered. That doesn't mean we're saying from this is in a final report. It's more to make, you know, council aware. Right.
So, for example, two things that always are coming up. Three things. One is the trailer, the mobile home prohibition. We don't have to necessarily say as a committee whether we think it is a good thing or a bad thing. We describe it and we say it would have an impact on housing.
Yes.
It would have an impact on housing at the low end of market. Trailers.
Oh, I think we should absolutely say this is a high priority thing and we need to get it done. Like, our purpose here is as experts on this who are advocates. Like, we shouldn't be saying, like, I think we should be pressuring council and giving them political heat if they fail to act on it.
Yeah, I just don't think.
I know you're a counselor, Maureen, and you probably don't want to be pushed around, but I'm here to do it.
Well, it doesn't work very well though, Glenn, and I'm more interested in having outcomes and doing a descriptive task. And we can certainly, say we would anticipate it would have this kind of impact, and it would be very useful for a particular part. But pushing a council on these issues, I don't think would work. I mean, the rest of the committee may disagree, but let me just finish my list of things that we could put before council and say, these are things you could do and you are choosing not to do. And then what? Another thing is that at the moment, and Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, at the moment, if you've got a house and you've got a B&B and you've got a secondary suite, you're bad.
Yeah.
Right?
No, we did change that.
You did?
I believe that, yeah, that got adopted. That was part of the secondary or the short-term rental
Okay.
bylaw change. I think we included that you were allowed to have both.
We're allowed to have both. Okay. I don't know if that's out there because I don't even remember it. Okay. What are some of the other things we could do? We have community land that is zoned for housing. And we have talked about for some time getting an expression of interest statement out there into the world to surface some of the potential, some of the folks who are interested in development. Another thing is we could use a kind of an orphans approach. I've had all sorts of people, and I'm sure, Daniel, you've had all sorts of people come to you saying, I want to do this project. I don't have the land to do this. There's a matching game that isn't happening to the extent that it might. So that gives me 3 items to add to the all zone duplex that Fritz put forward: the trailers, the EOI on community lands, and the matching for people who often have money and who have interested parties, but who just haven't identified an appropriate piece of land. Okay, I'll be quiet now, but that's where I'm coming from. I just really would like to make sure that by the end of this year, we have something, we've done something, as a committee.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks, Maureen.
Sorry, Robin,
Steph, I'm
can I-
seeing, yep. Go ahead, Steph.
Sorry, just for new members, it's wonderful to use the chat for background, but if you've got some substantive comments, it's wonderful to say them out loud so that if anybody decides to watch the meeting, they can hear it and other members can respond in
I'll
public.
just end up interrupting people too much if I do it, and I'll get,
I think
so the point I was just making is I do think we actually have quite a few specifics that came from that report, such as requiring newly constructed single-family detached housing to be suite ready. As Maureen was saying, getting rid of the mobile home restriction. There's even, discussion of setting up a van park for van living people who are these contractors who are coming back and forth to the island so much. Like, there were a lot of really specific things that they said in the suggested actions.
I think what would be useful is that there is a list that we just circulate around, like, you send it out, you add something to it, and you copy it back to everybody, and then it grows. And if we take every thought seriously for a while and then decide what goes to council, then we'll fair enough.
Set up a Google Doc. Go at the Google Doc.
Say it again, please.
Set up a Google Doc.
Oh,
And just start
Then we can,
and cross-reference to the housing needs report where there is a specific reference, because that will help Daniel if he, because it'll be Daniel who'll be bringing this report, whatever this report ends up. That's right, isn't it, Daniel?
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, helpful for council too to say, okay, this isn't just the committee, this is the committee. There's a pull in on the report that we have and that council's adopted.
yeah. Well, I've been making notes, and I think a lot of these are building on things we've talked about before, and I appreciate Maureen kind of laying it out. How I've kind of titled is like, what are some actionable items that council can actually do? So like you say, kind of rather than these like vague headers of, you know, do this, do that, or I'm sorry, I'm trying the report, you know, enhance density on properties that are already serviced. We say actually, you know, develop duplex zoning in appropriate areas on the island. And I really think Fritz is onto something. And I think a lot of us agree on the whole two-tier zoning and implementing FSR, if not across the island, in targeted areas. You know, maybe it starts like we've done with other things. Maybe it starts in particular zonings or particular areas as sort of a test case, a pilot project, and then see how it goes. And then it gets rolled out wider, those kinds of things. So I think there's some really actionable items. And I agree with about essentially trailers. That's something that people keep talking about. It keeps coming up all the time. I'm sure there's tons on the island that aren't legal, and you know, it would be better if they were, and had proper facilities and all those kinds of things. So really seeing how, I think making a recommendation as to how in the world that could function, what that could actually look like, whether it's on people's individual properties and having guidelines for that, or whether it's, as Glenn sort of suggested, I'm not sure how you tackle it, but actually creating, you know, a trailer park, for lack of a better word. I know lots of people are keen for that, and there's a lot of challenges there, but maybe at least council can open the door to it. And like say, maybe there's a mechanism like an EOI, right? I know you were referencing to community land, but maybe that's, you know, something else. It's one of the things that was in our work plan, was kind of creating these, I think it's in our number 4, innovative housing solutions, is like, maybe there's a couple of different EOIs we can put out there. So some on the community land for sure, especially stuff that's already zoned. But some for these kinds of things, like, hey, we're, you know, council might be supportive of this. Is there anybody out there who actually wants to develop this thing, for example, a trailer park? And, you know, come talk to us, and because like the rezoning is a big hurdle. So, you know, whether it's supportive and taken care of, and correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, if it's a temporary use permit, or if there's some other mechanism, or if there's support from council about either deferring or waiving rezoning fees, you know, those ways to encourage people so that they're not taking on all the risk. If it's a outcome that the community wants and that council wants to support, how can you support that private entity to get to that, whether it's a rezoning or a temporary use permit or something? Yeah, so I've got a list going, so I can sort of populate a Google Doc and we can send it around. But I agree, like, let's try and do that really proactively. Like, let's just try to get that done between now and the next meeting, whenever that is, or even in the next month, and try to get something to council, seeing as it's April already, and see if there's anything that we can do. Like I say, Maureen, I appreciate what at the end of this year, what can we say we've actually done? It would be great to have a couple of things, ticked off the list. Anybody else have any other comments on, say, this list of actionable items before we kind of
I will say, I want to add something to it. As you probably know, the last year with, COVID, keeping an architectural office going has taken a lot of energy. But before that, I actually had spent a fair amount of time on reviewing on these bylaws. Mm-hmm. And I think I actually have a fair amount of material set up to respond, to what now is identified as being more useful at this phase in the process. Now, if you can can you give me a screen share for a sec? I just want to pull out something I did about a year ago that you remember it, but I find it interesting just to show. Can you do that or not?
I think you have access, and you have to just go to, is there a screen share button at the bottom?
I have share screen here, but I just don't know if that has to be initiated by you, no?
No, I think if you've been given permission, so I think if you click on it, it should work. Steph, is that right?
Okay.
Yep.
Can you actually see my screen now or not?
Not
And
yet.
while we're waiting, Glenn's already created.
Oh, share there. Wait a second. Share.
Yeah, that's where it looks like it's working. Yep,
There you
there we go.
So this thing I did quite a while ago,
Yep.
and it's kind of
Whoa.
interesting because, like, if you talk about secondary suites and adding density, I'm not saying we would do exactly this, okay? But it's just an example of what can be done. So here, this was done from the biggest parcels on the left side, upper left side, going to smaller parcels, right? It basically covers all the zoning. And then it showed how big the little blue boxes is how big the maximum size is of a secondary suite. And it shows the impact that the secondary suite or the green one coach house, right, has on density, just in a visual way. So for instance, if we say, well, maybe this whole idea that there is no densification at all in the rural lands, right, is not true. Maybe if there is a tiny little structure somewhere or something like that, right? Also, this probably gives an idea that having a maximum allowed, having a maximum density, like a floor space ratio, is also highly useful in the rural areas. If you look at the upper level part, this has been, I think, Danielle, you checked this once, but maybe it should be checked better. But what it does say, it gives you the maximum area that you can build, which is just absolutely freaking huge. You know, I mean, something like 48,000 square feet. Now, if you can build 48,000 square feet, obviously you cannot use two-tier zoning as an instrument to encourage people to do anything, because they cannot build already about 10 times more or 100 times more than they need, right? So this is an example. Now, out of that comes recommendations. So anyway, so I just wanted to let you know that there is things that are done in the past that can easily be brought in as potential recommendations.
Yeah, no, definitely, Fritz. And we have it in the work plan under number 2 to complete a couple of projects in progress, which is and one of them is your land use bylaw review. So for sure, we want to try to get that done this year, if not, well, sooner than later. Is there any other comments on this list of, let's call them actionable items, that we can put together to go to council before we move along? Ron?
I have a point I'd like to raise, yes.
Yeah.
Just going back to the housing action plan, I'm a bit confused here. I agree with all the comments that everybody has made and some excellent thoughts about some possible specific actions that could be taken. And Daniel, I'm just kind of wondering exactly why the housing action plan was so abstract. It boils down to 4 objectives, and then the so-called strategies, as often as not, they're really just rewording of the objectives. And was it really just a statement of objectives? Was it the only mandate that the housing, that the planning department was given, or is the planning department without specific recommendations as to how these could be implemented, could be achieved?
I mean, the housing action plan comes as part of the housing needs report that was completed last spring. I would say like more of the work was done in that report on the like cataloging the housing needs than on the housing action plan at the end. There is more like in the actual, I don't know if you looked in the actual report itself, like that does go into the strategies a bit more. That's sort of just a category name, and there are some actions that are suggested for each one to explore more. But I mean, I agree, you kind of look at the list, and if you didn't know any of that and you sort of knew Bowen housing market a little bit, you'd probably say, well, we need more affordable housing and more housing for seniors and more housing for young families. And it's not very, I think that's often the challenge of like housing in general, housing affordability is it's not like, sometimes people try looking for like the one neat trick that will solve housing, but it seems like, communities across BC and across North America are facing the same challenges where it's like, well, there's not affordable housing, and how do we deal with that?
Just to note that the needs assessment was done for the most part by an external an external company. So Daniel, I know that BIM planning had some input, but my understanding is it really was a product of external consultants who work with many different communities and bring their findings back to those communities. And then we bring to bear our local knowledge of, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, we could do this, we could do that. So I think that's where we're kind of at right now. But again, as I said, when I looked at the vagueness of some of the points, it just didn't feel so comfortable. Just in terms of council receptiveness, the next steps for the housing policy is sneak preview. Number one in the housing section for the island plan, and the second point has to do with that land use bylaw review that you've been working on, Fritz. So the council should be poised to receive some solid information in the short run on this area. I think that's fair to say. Danielle, is that
Maureen, when you said how receptive council is, what did you mean by that?
That they're looking for implementable ideas. Yes. They're also, as we talked about, Fritz, at different points in a council term, they are more or less receptive to certain ideas, depending on the goals that they've managed to achieve in the preceding years. And I think that we've made quite a bit of progress with housing in some areas and not at all in others. So they're going to be looking for some areas where they, in my view, where there could be some wins.
But did you mean that if something is too overwhelming, or some ideas can be simple, right, and easy, and probably councillors may think that most Bowen Islanders see some merit in it, or would be supportive. Other ones may be more challenging for council because they don't know, or they may fear how their electorate is responding. So, and we're just 1 year and a bit from elections, right? So then, can you say how, in your mind, that impacts how effective our committee can be?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it makes our doing good work that much more important.
Okay, but so you're not saying you have to be careful and no, just go for it.
No, I'm saying I think being clear and being comprehensive at this point, and putting stuff out in the public realm where council can express its views on, yes, we're going to pursue that. No, we're not going to pursue that. Yes, we'll pursue that. And having it be very transparent. If I mean, the mobile home discussion has been going on in the wings for I don't know how long. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's ever actually formally come to council. Has anyone, Daniel, ever come to council and said, I want to build a mobile home park?
I mean, not since I've been here.
Yeah. Not since
I mean, it's one of the things, like some variant of it, either mobile home or like tiny home village.
Yeah.
It is one of those categories of things that I have lots of first conversations with people. I mean,
yeah, but the first thing somebody's going to do when they go to think about this is they're going to say, oh, it's illegal here, and they're going to drop it.
I mean, some of it too, I think, because I sort of outlined to people, well, this is how the rezoning process would be. Mm-hmm. And then the challenge is them finding a site where, in essence, like the seller is willing to wait while they rezone it. Because people don't want to buy it and then chance a rezoning. They would rather, put an offer in subject to rezoning or something. But then on Bowen, generally, then if you're selling your land, you'd rather sell it to somebody who's going to buy it as opposed to wait for a rezoning. So, I often think like the Belterra co-housing was successful because the proponent was the owner of the land and could sort of wait it out.
Yeah, it was successful, but it took forever.
Yeah, so hence, if it was a group of people wanting to do it on somebody else's land, it may not have been successful.
Yeah. I think it's like the rezoning is, I would argue, one of the biggest hurdles. And that's where I'm wondering if this idea of putting out expressions of interest and there's more work to that, because you'd have to get council would have to agree, what are they willing to do? How can they support something like this? But I think it's going to have to be something that comes from council, because agreed, I think there's people out there keen to do it and have lots of ideas, and then they sort of hit this hurdle, like Glenn says, either it's flat out illegal and so somebody drops it, or they come meet with Daniel and there's all these hurdles to rezoning and they drop it. Like there's very few people that have the time and energy and resources and finances to pursue a rezoning application, whether they own the land or not. And so I think if it's something that comes from council and they say, hey, we're looking for this, here's how we can support you. We can waive fees, we can defer fees, we can do whatever. For example, and I don't know if this is possible, but kind of like if council takes the risk on rezoning and says, we'll defer the fees and you only have to pay them if you're successful in your rezoning. I don't know if that's something they would go for, but it's like that takes away the hurdle. So if you say, we really want a trailer park, I'm just throwing this out there as an example. I'm obviously not speaking for council. If council decides in the future, we really want a trailer park, here's our expression of interest. We are willing to take the risk on these rezoning fees. You bring it before council. We'll work together on the rezoning, go through that process. If you're successful, yes, you will have to pay us all the fees for the rezoning. But if you're not, then you won't, and we'll just take the loss. Do you know what I mean? That removes that hurdle, right? So there's still a bunch of work that has to be done. And obviously there's fees to surveyors and all that stuff that still have to be covered, but that removes one of those huge hurdles and the risk, right? So then they're not taking on all of the risk for it. So that's, I think, one example of how council could be really proactive in doing something. That's just, it's just a thought. I know there's lots of details to work out and probably things in there that don't work, but those kinds of ideas. Okay, anything else? I feel like, should we just kind of roll into the work plan? Because I feel like a lot of this discussion is also going to be in the work plan. So let's go into that, and then feel free to come back to this housing action plan if there's a point that crosses over. We need to come back to it. So I'm wondering if we should put up, I don't know, Glenn, you've posted a couple of Google Doc links. Are those?
They're all identical links, and they're just a document that's specific to saying, here are the specifics that I extracted from the housing plan that were the most specific ones that weren't things like figure out some particular strategy. It was like, if you do this one, here's a law. It's practically written here.
Yeah.
Sign on the dotted line and we're good to go.
Okay, great. So we can look at that. And
Bottom link is the one you don't need permission for.
Oh, okay, great. So maybe what I'll do is unless you've got it, Steph, do you want me to screen share the work plan?
I can if it's easier for you.
Do you mind doing that? Do you mind being the scribe and changing that? Okay, so
no, I would love to do that.
All right, so why don't we screen share the work plan from Steph, and she can edit as we go. And I know I was just looking at as we were all talking, the first item under 1 housing needs assessment, I think we can remove, because review housing needs assessment and pull out strategic steps and prioritize recommendations for council. I feel like I just want to reword it maybe, because I feel like Daniel's kind of already done some of those steps, and then maybe what we reword it to. I still can't see anything, Steph, is it?
Yeah, it's black.
Oh, then Steph's muted. It's maybe just taking a minute to load. And you're muted, Steph, so I can't hear you. That's okay. So the first one I think is we'll talk more about actionable items as opposed to identifying strategic steps and prioritize. So which is what we just talked about, creating this list of actionable items for council for recommendation to council. Well, Steph's on the line. I wonder if
she's phoning you probably.
Well, hopefully not. My phones are off, so hopefully not.
No, she was
So
calling
maybe-
me, but it had
Oh,
somebody
okay.
else's name on it.
Okay, well, here, maybe I'll screen share. Can you guys see my screen now?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay.
that?
Is it just black?
Yeah, it's black.
Oh, okay, so there must be a
Oh.
problem with screen sharing at the moment then.
She says everything's frozen for her.
Oh gosh, okay.
We can
so
see you
Steph's-
move, Steph.
Yeah, so Steph's frozen and you still can't see anything of my screen.
It's funny.
No, okay, so sorry,
And all
everybody,
it
we'll
says is
just,
Steph Short has started screen share.
yeah, so we'll have to, okay, we'll have to just talk through it then. Yeah, and hopefully maybe people have it in front of them. It was sent in an email. Steph sent it out in an email. I'm just searching for Steph. She sent it in an email April 16th at 4:30. So hopefully if you can open it up and follow along. Develop this list of actionable items. So let's do that. I'm gonna cross out the other one. So cross out that first point and just reword it. Explore rent bank. I'm not sure. This was something that was left over from the last one. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's a good one to have on there. I'm not sure how high a priority that should be. Setting targets. I think this is something that would be useful and something we could recommend to council to actually set a specific number of affordable housing units to be built or by a certain date. And that, I feel like that sort of gives people a goal or gives, the community a goal. Oh, there we go. The screen share stopped anyways. That gives the community a goal and it gives them something to work towards. So I think that could be a recommendation. Continue the subcommittee work, including the land use bylaw review. Should now be informed. I think I'm going to delete that one because we cover that elsewhere down in the plan. So I'm going to get rid of that one. Let me see.
Robin,
Yeah.
It's
if I
not
can screen
really
share.
the land use bylaw review. It is the other way around. It's just reviewing the land use bylaw to find items that can be brought forward to council. Because like
Okay.
if that's, we're not doing a land use bylaw review, that sounds like a very big task, and we're not doing an OCP review. We're just picking out bits and pieces that lead to ideas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do know what you mean. Sorry, that was just shorthand. So no, I think it's good to be really clear on that. So review the land use bylaw to find opportunities can you guys see my shared screen now? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll work on that. Great. So review the land use bylaw to find opportunities for actionable items.
It's to review. Isn't it to review the land use bylaw to identify constraints on housing?
Yeah, but I'm afraid that sounds too much like we're taking on the huge task of reviewing the land use bylaw. I think we just have to be more targeted with examples.
But we call it a targeted review. I feel like that's a little more specific because it's not about reviewing the whole thing. It's about saying, hey, here are some sections of the land use bylaw that we have identified as opportunities. Either they're constraints, so this being here is constraining things and we should look at changing it, or here's an opportunity where we could change this specifically that would open things up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's the example that is the trick. If you have an example of what can be done, and then you say from therefore, the land use bylaw prevents it from happening and something needs to be done, then people understand it and they can digest it.
So I think that's the same thing, research current bylaw issues. So I think like that's the same thing.
Yeah, no,
I don't think that's,
fair enough.
yeah. So I'm just going to get rid of, just to tidy things up. So let's go back up because I think that was in this housing needs assessment category. So we've got
Thanks,
under this, support planning staff with reviewing and prioritizing all strategies from that. So I think that's what we're doing right now. So I don't think that we need to have that as a separate line item. And then it says make connections and collaborate per 9.22 strategy 1, facilitate more discussion between private nonprofits, developers, landowners. Okay, so that was one of the things that was in Daniel's presentation, I think. Okay, so I think that's a valid one. I'm not sure exactly how we action that or how much of a priority, but I think that's a valid one to have in our work plan. Anybody have any other thoughts on housing needs assessment as this item before we move along? No. Okay.
What does, just language, what does reformation to council mean in the first bullet point?
Oh, it's probably my bad spelling for recommendation. Sorry, probably terrible typing in autocorrect. All right, number 2.
Can we slow down? Sorry,
Of course.
be difficult. Go back up.
Yeah.
The work plan goes to council. When they read the work plan, which they do, they will ask questions, and I'm the only one here. So, and Daniel, obviously. Why are we exploring a rent bank? I need to be able to say why we're doing that.
So this is a leftover from last year. I think, was the rent bank identified, Daniel, do you remember, was that in the housing needs assessment, or is this something that we came up with? I honestly can't remember the origins of it. Is this something that just came to our attention that we thought this was something worth looking at for the community?
If I remember correctly, there was a newspaper article that someone read, and a rent bank is full of cash where if people run into difficulties in making their rent, they apply to it.
Yeah.
I think we should take it out of there.
Okay.
Yeah. Because
it is referenced in the housing needs report.
Is there?
Okay.
Under one of the strategies, it's one of the suggested actions. But
okay.
Do you think we should keep it then, Daniel?
Yeah, I definitely think we should keep it.
I'm asking Daniel. Daniel, do you think we should keep it?
I mean, it's something we've had on the list to explore for a while and never really gone further than that.
So I'm just looking at the website now
like,
just to see. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, it's providing loans for people who are short on
rent.
Like short on rent for a month or 2 months, and it'll provide that short-term loan to help people not avoid eviction, in essence.
So what I'm looking, oh, sorry, go ahead.
But in a much larger community, that was one thing where the concept came up. And we have a lot of federal government and provincial programs that are coming into play to assist.
If I may be so bold, I've just looking at their website, and it looks like how it works. And by the way, they are in very small communities, Maureen, interestingly. Anmore is listed here, Enderby, I don't remember, Belcarra. So there are very small communities, but they're all partnered with a nonprofit. So it looks like it really isn't, this isn't the right word, isn't the purview of municipal council, really. I think it's something that a local nonprofit would have to take on, or maybe we partner with a nonprofit, nearby on the North Shore or something like that to see if they could offer those services. So
can we elaborate then? Explore rent bank options provided by a nonprofit organization. And that will clarify what's being, what this is. And as far as Anmore and Belcarra being users of a rent bank, Belcarra has apparently no renters at all.
Oh, right.
If you look at their census data, it's like 0. And Anmore is probably comparable.
And I think it's just because, again, if you look on their website, I'm thinking it's covered by, so for example, they're covered by one organization that's called the Share Family Community Services, and they cover Anmore, Belcarra, Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, and Port Moody. So it's one organization that has like an umbrella over a number of communities. So it might be worth finding out. Again, I think it's actually the only actionable item here would be to find a nonprofit that would be ready and willing to work with you to chase it up.
I think, Robin, just looking, it's like City of North Van, Harvest Project serves City of North Van District, North Van District, West Vancouver.
Yeah, so maybe it's getting in touch
reaching
with
out to them to say, would you cover Bowen as well? And then,
that's a great idea.
And then the other point is that we're being tasked to come up with a housing policy, not an affordable housing policy. What we have on the books right now is affordable housing. So it's being expanded. So the targets.
What do we know about need for people to receive short-term rental assistance?
I mean, partly because if we knew there was a big need, it might be more of a motivating factor. But like certainly, I think if it's as simple as reaching out to this existing organization and saying, "Hey, could you cover Bowen as well?" and it's not too much work, I don't think we would need to worry too much about the need, and then just make sure people know about it. What are you thinking, Ron? Like if there's a low need or a high need, how would that change our actions?
Well, I just think it's a little bit ass backwards to start discussing a solution when we haven't yet gathered any information about the problem.
Yeah, I think it's more of how it came about, not so much a specific solution to an unknown problem, more like this was an opportunity. Somebody found out about it. This is a service that's available. We figured there might be some people on Bowen that it could be useful to. So it was more of identifying that an existing thing that's already out there that isn't currently available to Bowen. So it's available in other communities. Does it make sense for Bowen to be a part of it as well? So I think that's more how it came about.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, good
think
question.
also the number of households that are in core housing need, and you can get that from the housing needs assessment. People are spending a lot of money on their rent, and the rents are, well, it's been an interesting year in terms of home prices and rents. They've skyrocketed. So I can't imagine that there wouldn't be some need.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm just watching the clock, and I don't know. I know we were only scheduled till about now, 2 o'clock. So is everybody okay to go for another sort of 15 minutes or so, and we'll try to get through this. I'm seeing nodding heads, so I'm not seeing any strong objections. So I think we're okay. All right. So we'll move on to number 2, identify challenges and opportunities in the municipal development process. So I'm happy to wordsmith that title. I think we sort of just got to a certain point when we were working through this. And so I'm happy for comments on the titles. And the goal being to identify opportunities to simplify or streamline development processes for identified priority housing needs. I feel like, yeah, this covers some of what we were talking about earlier. So identify ways the municipality can support the creation of affordable and diverse housing options. So is there, so it's basically would just be exploring these things, removing any DP or variance requirements, moving applications to the front of processing lines. I'm not sure if these are available to us, but looking at them as options. And I think these are some specifics, but it goes down to this targeted review. Maybe I'll bring that up because I think that's, I think this is relevant, this targeted review of the land use bylaw. So maybe I'll actually take out names because I don't think we need that here. Actually, so I'm thinking for the purpose of, well, let's leave the notes, and we can always strip things out to simplify it to go to council. But these are examples of some of the things that I think Glenn and I came up with and carried over from probably some of the things we've talked about before on the committee. So smaller minimum lot sizes, maximum house sizes, suite ready. Yeah, everything that we kind of talked about earlier.
The streamlining point, the removing the development permit and the development various permit requirements. Does that have a hope, Daniel? And is that wise?
I mean, I feel like, we have a move for more DP requirements.
I can't remember, Glenn, did you add that one, or is that a leftover from, I just wanted to see if there was a comment or more thoughts on it, or was that maybe a leftover from an earlier draft? I can't remember.
I think it was leftover from a draft. And we updated it to say /DVP instead of just DP, but. Yeah.
Okay. But I'm happy to remove it if it's not really making sense to people to streamline that, unless anybody has any objections.
I mean, I can share with the committee that UBCM has a grant out right now for municipalities to improve their permitting process. And so I'll be submitting an application, but that's more about like having true online applications and how the permitting works.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I
And I
don't know how you can actually change that, because like if you think about development permits, right? When are they required? How can you just remove that? I just don't get it. Like,
I don't know. Either.
yeah, no, that's okay. I'm
No,
happy to
it's
just
really
take it out.
difficult.
Like I say, it might just be, it was just a leftover, possibly.
The streamlining, the notion of streamlining, I think is a good notion, but I'm just not certain, given capacity, the extent to which, you know, like fast tracking is great when you've got a lot of staff and a gazillion applications, but again, when you're a small community with a small staff and a relatively small number of applications coming through, I mean, is going to the front of the queue an option, Daniel?
I mean, it's like we had council direction to do that, like most recently for the fire hall building permit.
Right.
So it means in terms of our review, we jump it to the top of the line. It's like, it probably saves you a couple weeks is reality what it comes down to.
Okay,
I'm wondering if we take that out, because I think you're right. And I'm glad to hear, Daniel, of that grant and opportunity, because I think that could be fantastic. Maybe we retitle that. So instead of streamline, we actually say, so this is identify ways municipality can support the creation of affordable diverse housing options by, maybe we say by supporting the development process for desired housing types. I feel like that's a little clearer and more succinct, right? Yeah.
and that's what we want.
And so ideas such as, you know, again, these might not all be reasonable and they need more details, but here's some ways that can possibly happen, you know. This is, yeah, EOIs for rezoning, those kinds of things. So, okay, I think that we're getting there. Take this out. I don't know why that's gray. Anyways, let's not worry about that now. So we talked about this targeted land use by use. So I'm not going to go through that in detail unless there's anything in there somebody wants to pull out. So Maureen, maybe I could ask you for some feedback. Is it, because I think a little bit of detail is good, not too much detail, but like this kind of detail, as in putting these, like, for example, you know, like that's what really these are. Like, it's not saying these are exactly what you should do. It's more like, here's some ideas of how you could do this. And this is what should be explored in terms of this. Is that useful for council to see those things?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and then there's the only thing left was this complete projects in progress projects. So the only one left is this infrastructure challenges. So I'm not sure, Fritz and Glenn had signed up for that. I know that Public Works is actively doing a review of at least the Snug Cove sewer system. So I don't think that that's worth any of the committee's time to invest in that, because they're working on it right now and have consultants working on it.
Robin, I think you just leave it in. And the reason is that it really relates to zoning and what can happen where. So for instance, there's places where building houses is actually quite easy and it's probably not in the code. Now, and if that can be done in a way that it's acceptable, then it can happen much faster because we don't have to wait.
Okay, so let's word it a little differently then. So infrastructure challenges and how they relate to zoning. Or is that, maybe that's a little too vague still.
Maybe leave it for now like that, and we'll change it as it's being circulated. You know what I mean?
Okay, so yeah, let's just identify that one needs to be kind of wordsmithed a little bit.
Stick in a verb at the beginning and just say monitor infrastructure challenges, because we're not actually doing anything about them, are we?
Well,
yes, we are.
What are we doing?
Well, okay, so over the
this committee.
Sorry?
As this committee, what are we doing?
Well, what we say is that there's opportunities where you can build, where the infrastructure challenges are not as much in your way. For example, right? So because like in the Cove, lots of things cannot happen because there's no sewer and septic.
Right.
well, if you look at the zoning bylaw and the OCP, everything is supposed to happen in and near the cove. So the two don't go so well together.
So what you're getting at more is the is that restriction, the sort of restricting development to the cove. I mean, maybe what we should be saying here is identify the advantages of development outside of the cove area.
Yeah, that will all come out of it. So I totally agree with you, but it's creating that awareness. And so, for instance, if the sewer and septic stay on our agenda in some way, then that's good.
Okay, so what if we, okay, so I think this is good. I think we've captured a couple of things here, and then I think we agree about the monitor. So identify advantages to development of density outside the cove and how they relate to future development of desired housing types. I think that's useful. Does that capture it? Because it's like, oh, we keep saying affordable housing and density in the cove, but what about out here where we can just build a septic field and get on with it? We don't have to wait for a sewer upgrade and all of that kind of stuff. And then, but then as Maureen said, also, let's put monitor infrastructure challenges, you know, in the cove or something like that, for example, sewer upgrades. Does that's clear, I think.
Yeah,
so, and I agree. I think it's a good idea to keep that on our radar because we'll know more by when we redo this work plan next year. We'll actually have probably some more information on that. So it can, you know, we can, I think monitor is the right term, the right verb. Okay, so I'm going to move on from that one. Financial tools to support creation of affordable, diverse housing on Bowen. So the goal is to provide recommendations on ways to create revenue and or reduce costs to support the creation of diverse, affordable housing. So I know we had, I know this first one's going to be very controversial. So I'm skipping ahead because I think the first one's the MRDT, which I think is really a good one. And I know it's in progress. And so it would be a recommendation to prioritize, you know, application for the introduction of MRDT from the point of view of our committee. I'm going to just put these other ones again, because I know the last one's most controversial. Research ways other communities are raising revenue. Should we say maybe for Housing Reserve Fund?
Yeah.
Because I think that we lost that in the title. It was the title was specific to that, and we broadened it a little bit just to financial tools. So looking at ways that we can raise revenue for the Housing Reserve Fund, research how to support other land ownership models. So cooperative housing, community land trust. Actually, I'm going to put land lease in here because that lends itself to the trailer park model. Because there's the mobile home, whatever you want, manufactured home parks, because they're, you know, that's part of that concept besides the actual housing type of a trailer on wheels or a manufactured home, which are both very economical housing types. Hand in hand with that is the land lease, like the ownership of the land, right? So like a traditional trailer park is owned by a single entity, and then people either own or lease a pad, like, and pay fees and stuff like that. So it's a different ownership model than I think we have on the island. So it would be, we'd have to look into that. And then this is the last one, which I know is controversial. And Glenn, I'm going to put you on the spot here because this is one that you wanted to add. And I did put the note because it has been addressed before. And so this was the note that came from this comment before. So I did make sure to include it. I'm just going to give it. Oh, there's no good colors here. Okay. Maybe I'll just make it gray. So this was the note that I can't remember. That was feedback from when it was commented on before. But Glenn, why don't you go ahead and
so my point on this is that in the housing needs assessment, it said that we needed a certain number of houses built per year. And based on the 1 year effect this had simply on Vancouver Island, if we had a similar 22% of our existing vacant homes become non-vacant as a result of this one change, that would give us a full year of brand new permanent housing available to people right then and there. That alone is a huge step up in our housing availability for starters. And second of all, on top of that, By not participating in this tax, we're not eligible for the funds available from the province that they make available to communities for the purpose of creating affordable housing. If we wanted to get into that rent bank thing, just dump the whole thing into the rent bank, and we've killed two birds with one stone.
So I'm actually not familiar with it, Glenn. So the funds that are created, I don't know if anybody else knows either, the funds that are collected from this speculation and vacancy tax go into a particular
Provincial
bank,
pool.
Yeah, and then that money is available to communities for the construction of affordable housing, and
yes,
it's issued as grants, or it's administered through BC Housing, or do you know the details?
I don't recall the details off the top of my head, but I know that by being exempt from it, we've made ourselves exempt from being able to take the funding in the first place.
Okay, yeah, I'm not familiar with it. So does anybody have any comments on this? I know it was discussed before. We have this note that the community actually put in quite an effort to get, and I don't recall this, sorry, it's out of my head at the moment. There was, I believe, a big push for us to be exempt. Am I right? That so it would be quite a reversal against a lot of public
small
sentiment.
Number of local homeowners. If we just have a policy, if we just said, look, the vast majority of Bowen Islanders are not temporary residents and are treating this as their primary residence, I don't see why we would have some small minority being overruling us in such a fashion, especially considering that 22% of them don't even have a leg to stand on, since they can easily convert over.
I mean, I do remember when it was announced and before it was shown that Bowen was exempt, like we did receive constant phone calls. I think there was in a session that somebody held in the council chambers that was packed.
It's not a small.
Yeah, you guys got every single one of the 22 people on the whole island who do it.
Sorry?
Well, it's actually, I believe, according to the last census, which is a bit outdated, it's about 25% of the homes are not occupied year round. I think that's the rough number. So it's a fairly large number. And then I don't disagree with you like this, and it could be that, say that if we take that number of homes, 22% of them might become permanent housing, which would be great. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm a little afraid of this one. I don't know. I like to stay away from controversial things. So I don't, hands up, who other comments on whether this, Ron, I was going to ask Ron, and then we'll go to Fritz in a minute. Ron, I was going to ask if you had any thoughts on this one.
Oh, well, first of all, full disclosure, I'm the part owner of a home on Bowen Island that is only occupied part of the year. But without getting into arguing the substance as to why I think why I disagree with Glenn, I guess I would just argue process. I mean, it's obviously a hot political issue. Bowen has addressed this this issue once, not too long ago. Do we really want to spend our time raising exactly the same political issue as has already been worked out politically? I think not.
I think that's well said, Ron. I feel like that's my hesitation, is this isn't that old. It was dealt with, whatever it was, 2 years ago. Maureen, do you remember, did this come before council, or was it simply, was the decision made for us and it didn't really come down to anything? I don't know, even recall if council had anything to do with it or provided feedback to the province.
We got tons of feedback. They don't know the municipality officially giving feedback, but it was councillors were contacting the province. And then they subsequently announced, released the map showing who was and wasn't included. So it was never clear to me if that was always their intention, was Bowen was excluded, and they just hadn't, because when they announced it, I think it said Metro Vancouver.
Right.
And then they, they drew it and they said, okay, well, Bowen's not included in that. But it wasn't clear if that was always the plan, or they just said Metro and then they looked at it later and thought, yeah.
Okay.
It was
so
very quick. It was very quick as well. The whole process and the confirmation we were excluded was in a telephone call. And
I want to say it was the same day or the following day. It never came to council. There was never a council. There was never a council meeting.
Right. Okay. Fritz, did you have some comments? Oh, sorry, Maureen, I'll come back to you.
Well, I just meant more in general. Full disclosure, I'm certainly impacted by it because I have a house where my wife is 4 nights a week, and an apartment in West Van where I am 4 nights a week. And I don't really know how else to work that. But this system, I find it like it's such a, I mean, the numbers are just unbelievable. Like, you know, in the city of Vancouver, there are some people that literally have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. It's unbelievable. And I personally believe more in encouraging, in facilitating, in enabling. And I find it less pleasant to live in a environment where things are regulated to the point that it affects, for a lot of people, their freedom to live the way they want. And you know, like, I just find it like it's easy to say we just have to collect some money. You know, I'm an architect, and of course working with all kinds of clients that have huge ramifications in the taxes that are invented, all for the best objectives, but they have on some people completely unreasonable impact. And so I personally think that there's a limit to how far you can push that. So I'm more for a society encourage, where we enable, where we provide opportunities, but the heavy hand from you shall not have a house here, I find it just like going to the point that, you know, personally I find it really undemocratic, you know, going to
Yeah.
like, can you tell how they have to spend their money and stuff like that? It's always not into that.
I have an idea how we could sort of get past this point. And Maureen, I don't know if you have any further thoughts, but maybe I'll just jump in and then you can comment. And I know, Maureen, you're only one person. Michael isn't here, but this work plan does have to be approved by council. So we're putting this together. It's going to council, and then council's approving it, and they're giving us our directive as to what we should be working on this year. My gut is telling me that if we include this, I don't feel that council is going to have an appetite for us to chase this and look at it. So I don't know, Maureen, if you want to comment. I know you're only one person, but if this came before council with this item on it, yeah, my sense is council is not necessarily going to want us to spend our time on this, but I don't know if I'm right.
I don't think council wants you to spend your time on this.
Yeah, that's kind of my sense.
We're talking about a quarter of the population of this island.
Yeah.
The homeowners on this island, and some of those homes actually are rental homes, so there's somebody else's primary residence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't think it would fly, and yeah, no, never mind.
Yeah. Okay. Just in the interest of time and moving on, so maybe Glenn, if you feel really strongly about this, we can take it offline, or we can make more comments as we sort of edit this by email later. But I think
if we don't have support from it within the group or the council, then I don't see any reason to push for it any further than I already have.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks, Glenn. Okay. And then the last one, number 4, innovative housing solutions. Identify opportunities for innovative housing solutions. I'm going. It's a little repetitive. Research best practices in other communities. Glenn's volunteered to look at some of these things, and there was an example of lot consolidations that Fritz had mentioned in West Van, like not allowing lot consolidations, and then looking at different solutions. And this kind of goes over a little bit with what we talked about in an earlier section, but, you know, putting out RFPs or EOIs. I should maybe to develop desired housing types. And then proactive rezoning, new partnerships, and pilot projects. So I know that's a little vague. Maybe we can sort of work on that through email or through the Google Doc or whatever we're going to do. Actually, no, we're trying to sort of get this done today, aren't we? And then we can send it out. So,
Question.
So if everyone, yeah, go ahead, Maureen.
Consolidation for single family houses. Do we do much in the way of lot consolidation on Bowen? Daniel, does that point make sense?
Maybe I'll just be a little clearer.
It makes sense. I'm trying to think if I know of any happening.
You know, the more the richer people, if you get more people with more money, then it's not unlikely to happen, particularly in waterfronts. But but maybe lot consolidation can also be positive. For example, if it's not going to be occupied by one big single family home, but if two smaller lots together can provide a far more innovative form of housing that maybe accommodates a few families, then a consolidation is actually positive. So it's just so it can be good or bad. Like, you know, what you see, West Vancouver stopped it because some people have endless money and they want 2 lots so they can build a house of whatever, 20,000 square feet or so.
Yeah. So I've just put it in. It was a little not worded well. So that's just one example of how another community has done something to sort of discourage housing types that they don't want. So I don't think we need to necessarily say that's what we would recommend, but I think it's more about researching best practices in other communities and how they're being innovative.
But it relates to their other initiatives. You know what I mean? Like, like we can give an example when it's useful and when it's not useful.
Yeah. Well, like I worked on one project where we consolidated 2 lots and built a 4-plex, right? So that's when it's useful, right? It's a housing type that's desirable.
Yeah, I would hope the West Vancouver model takes things like that into account.
Yeah. Okay.
The West Vancouver model is simply the reason why council adopted it was simply to stop these huge monster homes.
Yeah.
That I just designed to the maximum, and loss, you know.
Yeah. So is everybody okay with this? I know it's it's a little vague. This one's not maybe as clear, but it's basically about let's look at research and find other innovative solutions and see if they can be applicable to Bowen. So it's a bit vague, but and then there were a couple of points that we thought maybe we would keep for next year because they're good, but we just wanted to make note of them, but we didn't think we should tackle them this year, which was the community engagement and the speaker series. We just felt like this year is not the year for vast community engagement. And I don't think that there's any, unless there's small things throughout that we're working on that's worth reaching out. I don't think it should be a high priority this year, just given everything that's going on, COVID, and it's very hard to get people together. And I think everybody's kind of exhausted of Zoom. And the speaker series, which again, if, I don't know, Maureen, because that was kind of something that we had worked on, if there's anything we particularly want to do this year, but we just sort of thought maybe those are 2 we could leave for next year to pick up again.
Well, the question will be community engagement about what? So my sense is just drop them from the plan.
Okay, even the speaker series, you don't want to?
Unless we've got something specific. I mean,
I think,
sorry.
No, I was going to say, I like the idea of us developing a speaker series, like of continuing to do a speaker series about housing, but I just feel like this year's probably not the right year for it. I think we're just all tapped out and it's not the right year to convene people in person. And I think everybody's pretty exhausted with Zoom stuff, but I like the idea of just kind of keeping it on deck for next year and at least just looking at it again next year. So we just want to kind of to note it, not lose it basically.
And the one thing that's not there is the Rent Smart.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And that was valuable.
Yeah. Workshops. Yeah. Cause I think okay, great. So is everybody good with that? I'll take out the crossed out things. And then is it okay to send this on then? Or do we want to do one little circulation by email and give everybody kind of maybe a week to review and then we can pass it on? I'm going to stop sharing now. And then we can pass it on. Yeah, so I'll just tidy that up and I'll send it around to everybody and give you a deadline to get back with any comments and then we can get it to Steph and she can get up to council. Excellent. Okay. Whew. All right. Thanks for hanging in, everybody. That ends the agenda.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Can I get a little vote on that, please?
Oh, okay, sure.
Recommend that council approve. Recommend that council approve the 2021 Housing Advisory Committee work plan as presented and amended at the April 20th meeting.
Okay.
Wow.
I'll move that.
How can you do that? Because you're still kind of circulated around for some time.
So is that the amended part?
It's the as amended part.
Okay.
She did 8 hours the word as amended. It's got a very good meaning.
Maybe amended.
So Steph, do we have to like move it and second it? Is that, so I'll move it?
Yes,
Does somebody
please.
want to second it?
Yes, please.
Anybody? Glenn, thank you. All in favor? Yep. Okay, approved. Thanks, Steph. And
Sorry, it wasn't more helpful.
no, that's okay. Technical difficulties. Okay, and then just a quick reminder that we do have on the last page of the agenda, we do have a sort of running list of recommendations. So I feel like actually I might take a look at these when I'm doing my amendments to the work plan and see if any of these fit into those categories, and I'll add them in and then I'll send that out. Because these have been just hanging around for a while, kind of for this purpose, because we knew we wanted to get them in somewhere, but we didn't have anywhere. So I feel like now's it. So I'll look at that. Okay, excellent.
Just one question.
Yeah, Maureen.
With the Google Doc, so we've got our
Yes.
work plan and we have our Google Doc of ideas. Is there any further direction we need regarding that document?
Oh, for the Google Doc. So the Google Doc was, I know Glenn shared the one, but that he's populated.
Yeah,
I
I just
was
created
going-
that because people were saying that they weren't sure if there were specifics, so I just pulled all the specifics.
Yeah. And then I'll add the notes that I had made. And this was about reviewing the housing action plan. So a list of actionable items. So it's just sort of a working document of actionable items that maybe we can all work on over the month and then revisit at the next meeting. So why don't I commit to sending an email? I'll populate it. I'll send an email to the group that says, hey, this is to work on over the next month. And here's the link to the Google Doc, and then we can go from there. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got 2 items to do. Okay. That's all right. I just have to remind myself to get those 2 things done. Yeah, I was so bored. All right. Thanks, everybody. I think if there's nothing else, we will wrap this up, adjourn. And Steph, we don't have
You
another
wanna-
meeting set up, do we?
Do you want to meet a month from today? 4 weeks from today?
Does this time work for people on a Tuesday afternoon? And that would be, what's the date? The 18th
The 18th of May,
of May
1
at
o'clock.
1 p.m.
That works.
Does anybody object?
Ron's frozen, so,
Oh dear.
oh, there he is.
Yeah.
1 o'clock, May 18th, Tuesday, Ron?
That work? Seeing no comments?
Yeah,
Fritz? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's book that in, and if there's any issues, we can figure it out later. Awesome. Okay, thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time. Have a
Thank
good rest of your
you.
afternoon.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Right.
Yeah, who's the last person standing?